They think they know what the footage showed. I've watched it more times than they have. More than the journalists, more than the people who slowed it down frame by frame and drew their little red circles on it. More than the men who decided, in a room I was never allowed into, what it meant. I've watched it in the dark with the sound off because there is no sound. There was never any sound. The cameras in the west corridor of Haveth Palace didn't record audio. And so the whole world built its story on 40 seconds of silence and the worst of what a body can look like when you don't know why it's moving. I know why it was moving. I was 11 feet away. I am the man in the gray coat who comes in from the left at the 31-second mark, and you all decided I was a hero. I wasn't. I want to get that down first before anything else, because I'm old now and my hands shake when I hold a cup, and I don't have the years to be careful with the truth anymore. I wasn't a hero. I was the slowest man in that corridor that night, and the only reason I'm remembered well is that the camera couldn't see the thing I failed to see. And the woman everyone hates, the woman they still hate, the woman whose name became a punchline and then a warning and then just a sad joke told at dinner parties. She's the one who did the thing they gave me credit for. She saved the girl. I got there second. The footage made it look the other way round. Let me tell you what's in it, the way they all saw it, and then let me tell you what was actually happening, because there's a difference between those two things wide enough to drown in, and I've been drowning in it for 31 years. The clip starts on an empty corridor. If you've seen it, and everyone's seen it, you know the corridor. Long, narrow, the kind of grand that's gone slightly tired. Haveth is old. The West Wing was the oldest part, the part they never modernized properly because money always went to the rooms the public might one day be allowed to photograph. So the West Corridor had this carpet, a deep red gone brownish under the lamps, worn to the weave in a track down the middle where 200 years of feet had walked. The walls were hung with portraits of dead Helmsworths nobody could name anymore. There was a tall window at the far end, and at night, when the clip was taken, that window was just a black rectangle with the corridor lamps reflected in it like a second, ghostly hallway hanging in the glass. I knew that corridor better than I knew the inside of my own flat. I'd walked it 1,000 times. The third lamp flickered when the heating came on. The floor creaked under the runner about 2/3 of the way down, near the door to the old music room, and you learned to step around it if you wanted to walk quiet, which, in my job, you always wanted. For the first 9 seconds of the footage, nothing happens. Empty corridor, lamps, the black window. People always skip this part. I never do. I make myself watch the empty corridor because for 9 more seconds everyone in that clip is still alive, and nothing has gone wrong yet, and I like to sit in that. The way you'd sit by a grave and pretend the person was just late. At 9 seconds, the princess comes in. The press called her the young princess, even after she'd been married 4 years because she stayed young in people's minds, the way some people do. Her name was Adurin. She'd married Edrin, the second son, the spare, the one nobody thought would matter, and then his brother had the accident on the coast road, and suddenly Edrin mattered very much and Adurin mattered with him, and she'd handled it God. She'd handled it with a grace that made the whole country fall a little in love with her. She was 26 that year. In the footage she's wearing a pale dress. You can't tell the color. The cameras saw everything in that washed gray-green of night recording. But I knew it was the soft blue she liked, the one she said made her feel less like a costume. She comes in from the south door. She's walking fast but not frightened. I've watched her gait in those first seconds 100 times trying to see if she knew, if some part of her sensed it, and she didn't. She's just a young woman walking quickly down a corridor late at night, maybe annoyed, maybe tired, her arms a little tight to her body the way you hold yourself when you're cold or when you've just had a conversation you didn't enjoy. She just left the king's study. I knew that. The world didn't, not at first. At 14 seconds, the queen comes in behind her. And this is where everyone's story and mine split apart like a road forking in the dark. Her name was Siba. Queen Siba, the king's second wife, which is a sentence that did her more damage than anything she ever actually did, because people will forgive a great deal, but they will not forgive a woman for being the one who came after the one they loved. The first queen, Edrin's mother, had died young and beautiful and beloved, frozen forever at the age where nothing about her could disappoint anyone. Siba married the king 11 years later, and from the first day she was the wrong woman in the right chair. It didn't matter what she did. It didn't matter that she was clever, or that she worked harder than any of them, or that she'd raised a stepson who wasn't hers and loved him in the awkward, careful way of someone who knows she's not allowed to. The country had a slot for her, and the slot was the cold one, the calculating one, the one who took the dead saint's place, and Siba lived inside that slot for 20 years whether she earned it or not. I guarded her for 8 of those years before the night in the corridor, so when I tell you what she was like, understand that I'm not guessing. I stood outside her doors. I drove in the cars. I saw her in the unwatched hours, which is the only place you ever see who someone actually is. She wasn't cold, she was tired. There's a difference, and almost nobody can tell it from the outside. She held her face very still because she'd learned that any expression she let onto it would be photographed and decoded into something ugly. So she gave them nothing, and they called the nothing cold, and the nothing became the story. I watched her practice smiles in the reflection of car windows that she would then not use because she decided they'd come out wrong. She kept a list, an actual handwritten list, of the names of the children of the staff and their birthdays because she said it was the one kindness nobody could spin against her. She had bad knees and never let it show in public, walked straight through pain that would have had me limping. And once, only once, when she didn't know I could see her, I watched her sit down on a service stairwell and just breathe for a minute with her hand pressed flat to her own chest like she was holding something in. That's the woman. Tired, careful, lonely, decent in the small ways nobody counts. That's the woman the footage turned into a monster. In the clip at 14 seconds, Siba comes in fast behind the princess. Faster than the princess. She's almost running, which a queen does not do, which is the first thing that made everyone's stomach turn when they watched it. Because we all know in our animal brains that a person of that age and that station does not run unless something is very wrong, and the something everyone supplied was rage. Her face, the cameras caught her face badly at an angle, half in lamplight, and it's twisted. I won't pretend it isn't. Her mouth is open, her eyes are wide. There's something in her expression that the still images, the ones they printed everywhere, made look exactly like fury. The queen's face of hate. One of them said, with that exact still, her mouth open mid-word, her hand already coming up. She's reaching for the princess. In the footage, you see Siba's hand come up and out toward Adurin's back, the fingers spread, and you see her mouth moving, shouting something, and the young woman half turns, startled, and then the queen grabs her, both hands, seizes the princess by the shoulder and the arm, and you see Adurin's body wrench sideways, hard, violently, thrown off her feet, and the whole world watching went, there it is. That's the moment, that's the queen losing control, that's the cold one finally showing what she really is, and Adurin goes down toward the wall with the queen's hands on her, and it looks, I will be honest, the first time I saw the footage, the actual footage, weeks later, when they made me watch it for the inquiry, even I who was there, even I felt my gut drop, because it looks exactly like an older woman attacking a younger one. That's what they think they saw. The queen lost control and attacked the princess, and a guard rushed in and pulled her off and shielded the girl with his body, and order was restored, and the queen was led away, and 3 weeks later it was leaked, and that was the end of Queen Siba as a human being in the eyes of the world. Now let me tell you what was in the corridor that the camera, bolted high in the corner pointing down the south end, could not see. I need to back up to earlier that evening so you understand why we were all where we were. There'd been a thing brewing in the family for months. I won't pretend I knew the shape of all of it. Guards aren't told. Guards are furniture that walks. That's the whole point of us, but you pick things up. You stand in enough rooms, and the silence in them starts to have a temperature. There was money trouble, the kind that doesn't make the papers because it lives in trusts and offshore arrangements and the quiet movements of estates. And there was something worse underneath the money trouble, something about Edrin's late brother, the heir who died on the coast road, and whether the accident had been quite as much an accident as everyone had agreed to say. I didn't know. I still don't know, not for certain, and I've made my peace with the not knowing because the alternative is a hole I'd fall into and never climb out of. But I knew this much by that winter. There were people inside the palace, inside the household, with their own reasons for wanting the line of succession to go a certain way, and Adurin, young, beloved, married to the new heir, possibly carrying the next one after that. There were whispers. Adurin was the most important person in that calculation and didn't know it. Siba knew it. That's the thing nobody understood. The cold, scheming queen they imagined, if she'd really been that woman, she'd have been on the side of whoever wanted the girl gone. Instead, she'd spent that whole autumn quietly, carefully, in the only way she was allowed, trying to protect her, moving people around, asking questions she shouldn't ask. I drove her to 2 meetings that winter that weren't on any schedule, and both times she came back to the car gray in the face and didn't speak the whole way home. The night of the corridor, the king had called Adurin to his study. Late. That was already wrong. You don't summon the heir's wife at 10:30 at night through the old West Wing, alone, no protection officer assigned, and I've spent 3 decades wondering whether the king knew what he was doing or whether he was just an old man being used by people cleverer than him. I was on a floating post that night, which means I covered the corridors rather than a person, which means I shouldn't even have been in the West Wing, except that I'd swapped with a man named Corwin who'd asked me to take his round so he could see his wife, who was sick. I've thought about Corwin a lot. If he'd kept his own round, he'd be the hero in the footage, and I'd be nobody, and his life would have gone the way mine did, the medals and the meaning and the rot underneath. I did him a favor, and it ruined us both in a way, and he never knew. So I was walking the corridors, and I came up the back stair into the north end of the West Wing, the end the camera doesn't cover, and that's the first piece of luck and the first piece of curse, because it means I saw the start of it with my own eyes and the camera didn't. And so for the rest of my life it's been my eyes against the lens, and the lens always wins, because the lens is what they show. Here's what I saw that the camera couldn't. The princess came out of the king's study upset. I could tell from the way she was walking, that tight, fast, arms in walk you can see at the start of the clip. She came down the corridor toward me, though she didn't see me. I was in the dark of the north end past the last lamp. And behind her, the queen came out of the music room. Now, the music room is the door near where the floor creaks. And the music room has another door, an inner one, that connects through to a little service passage. And that service passage connects to a dozen places, because that's how old palaces are. They're riddled with veins like a body, with ways for servants to move unseen. And that night the queen had been in the music room, and I will tell you why, because she told me, after, in the one conversation we ever had about it, the only time either of us ever spoke of it directly. She'd been in the music room because she'd been waiting. She knew the king had summoned the girl. She didn't trust the summons. She'd put herself in the path of it. She'd been sitting in the dark of the music room for 2 hours, an old woman with bad knees, waiting in the cold to make sure the girl came out the other side of that conversation safe. That's the monster. That's the cold, scheming queen, sitting alone in the dark for 2 hours to guard a girl who hated her. And when the princess came out and started up the corridor, the queen came out after her, and I saw the queen's face change. I saw it before the camera saw it, from the front, from the north end, full on, and I will go to my grave swearing to what it was, and it was not rage, it was fear. It was the purest, most absolute fear I have ever seen on a human face, and I have seen men die. She was looking past the princess. Not at her. Past her. Up. Because in the gallery above the corridor, there's a gallery, a sort of minstrel's balcony left over from when that hall was a music hall. You can't see it in the footage because it's above the camera's frame. In the gallery, there was a man. I saw him for less than a second. A shape leaning out over the rail, both arms up, holding something long and dark. My brain, the trained part, the part that had run that drill 1,000 times, knew what it was before the thinking part of me caught up. A weapon, braced, aimed down into the corridor, at the only person standing in the open below it, lit by the lamps, walking slow and upset and unaware. At Adurin. And the queen, Siba, who'd seen it a half-second before I did, who was closer, who had no training, no orders, no reason in the world except that she'd spent the whole winter terrified this exact thing was coming. She ran. That's the running in the footage. The running everyone called unhinged. She ran at the girl, screaming, that's the open mouth, the shout the camera couldn't hear, screaming down, get down, move, and the girl turned, startled, not understanding. And Siba didn't have time to explain. You don't explain, there wasn't time, so she did the only thing a body can do. She grabbed the girl by the shoulder and the arm and she threw her. That's the violence in the footage. That's the queen seizing the princess and wrenching her off her feet. She threw a 26-year-old woman out of the firing line with the last of the strength in her old arms and her bad knees. And Adurin went down hard toward the wall, out of the open, into the dead space under the gallery, where the man above couldn't get an angle. And Siba was still standing in the open when the bolt came down. I want to stop here for a moment, because this is the part I can't watch. The footage doesn't show it. The footage shows the princess going down toward the wall and the queen's body sort of stuttering. That's the only word I have for it. There's a jolt that goes through her. You can see it if you know to look at 29 seconds, a hitch in her whole frame like a film skipping. And the people who analyzed it said she'd overbalanced from the force of her own attack, that she'd thrown herself off her feet attacking the girl, and that fit the story, so they kept it. It was the bolt. A crossbow bolt, they don't make noise, they're the silent ones, that's why you use them inside, and it came down out of the gallery and it took her high in the back, near the shoulder of the same arm she just used to throw the girl clear. The hitch in her body in the footage is the moment the bolt went into her. The world watched the moment Queen Siba was shot saving a girl's life, and decided it was the moment she lost her balance attacking her. I started running at 26 seconds. You can do the maths. By the time I came into frame from the left at 31, it was already over. The man in the gallery was already gone. He dropped back the instant his bolt landed into the dark of the balcony, into the service passages, into the veins of the palace, and he was never found, not really, not in any way they'd let me see. I never even got a clear look at his face. A shape, arms up, gone. So when I came into frame, what was there for the camera to record? A queen fallen half over the body of the princess. A princess on the ground against the wall screaming. And me, a guard, arriving. And here's the thing I have to live with, the thing I did. I didn't see the bolt either. Not at first. I'd seen the shape in the gallery, I'd registered threat, up, weapon. But in the 3 seconds it took me to cross that corridor, my training took over. And my training said the principal is on the ground, and there's a body on top of her. And the body on top of her was the queen. And for 1/2 of 1 second, the worst half-second of my life, my brain did the same thing everyone watching the footage would later do. It saw an older woman on top of a younger one, and it called the older woman the threat. I pulled her off. God forgive me, I pulled Siba off the girl. I got my hands on the queen and I dragged her back hard, the way you drag an attacker, and she was so light. She was always so much lighter than she looked, and she made a sound, I heard it. The camera didn't, no sound. She made a sound when I pulled her because I was pulling on the side where the bolt was. And the bolt moved. And that's a sound I still hear, on the bad nights. That small wet sound a person makes when you've hurt them worse trying to help. And then I saw it, the bolt standing out of her back. And I understood all at once, the whole shape of it, the gallery and the running and the throw. I understood that the woman in my hands hadn't attacked anyone, that she'd just done the bravest thing I'd ever see a person do, and that I had just hauled her off the girl she died for and torn the wound wider doing it. In the footage, that's the part where I shield the princess with my body. At 36 seconds, I'm crouched over a Durin, and the queen is behind me on the carpet, and it looks like a guard putting himself between a young woman and danger. It looks like the cleanest, simplest, most heroic thing in the world. It was a man kneeling over a girl who was already safe, with his back to the woman who'd saved her and whom he'd just finished injuring, too stunned and too ashamed to know what to do. That's the shield. That's the heroism. 40 seconds and the clip cuts out at 40 because that's where the corridor camera's loop reset, and the last frame, the one they froze and printed and built statues out of in their minds, is me over the princess, gray coat, broad back, the picture of duty. You can't see Sybil in that last frame. She's just out of it. The most important person in the corridor, and she's a centimeter past the edge of the picture, on the floor, bleeding, and that, more than anything, is the truest thing the footage ever did. It put her just outside the frame. It always put her just outside the frame. She didn't die. I should say that. People assume she did, because the story needed her to disappear, and disappearing and dying look similar from far away. She lived. The bolt missed the things that would have killed her by an inch by less. The household doctor came, and then real doctors came quietly through the service entrance, and it was handled the way everything in that family was handled in the dark, off the books, by people whose whole job was making the truth more convenient. And that's where the second betrayal happened, the one that wasn't mine, the one I only watched. Because there was a choice to make, that night and in the weeks after, and the choice was this: do we tell the truth, or do we keep the family standing? The truth was a catastrophe. The truth was, there is a man inside this palace, a man who got into the gallery, who knew the princess would be in that corridor at that hour, who knew the camera's angles, who got out clean through passages only the household knows. The truth was that the heir's wife had nearly been assassinated by someone inside the walls, which meant the assassin had help inside the walls, which meant the rot went up. How far up nobody wanted to find out, because every direction you looked for the answer, you found someone whose fall would bring the whole thing down. The dead brother on the coast road, the money in the trusts, the summons to the king's study at 10:30 at night. Pull any one thread, and the whole tapestry comes apart, and there's nothing behind it but a family eating itself. So they didn't pull the thread. They had the footage, 40 seconds of silent video that, with no other context, told a clean, contained, survivable story. The queen had a breakdown. The cold one, the strange one, the one nobody trusted anyway, had finally cracked, had attacked the beloved young princess in a fit of jealousy or madness, or whatever the public wanted to fill in, and a brave guard had stopped her. And it was a personal tragedy, a sad story about an unstable woman, the kind of story that hurts no institution and threatens no succession, and requires no investigation into who exactly is murdering members of the royal family from the inside. All it cost was one woman's entire life. They didn't even have to lie. That was the genius of it, the thing that still makes me cold. They didn't have to fabricate a single frame. They just had to not explain. Let the footage out, and someone let it out 3 weeks later, leaked. And I have my ideas about who, and I'll take them with me. Let the footage out with no audio and no gallery and no bolt and no 2 hours in the dark of the music room, and let the world do the rest. The world was so eager to do the rest. It had wanted to hate her for 20 years, and here, finally, was permission, 40 seconds of grainy permission, and it fell on her like wolves. And Sybil, this is the part, Sybil let it. I told you we spoke of it once. It was about 5 months after. She was out of the worst of the recovery by then, though her shoulder never came right again. She carried that arm a little wrong for the rest of her life, and the papers said it was nerves, said it was the breakdown, said the strain had aged her. I'd been reassigned by then, of course. You don't keep the guard from the footage on the Queen's detail, it raises questions. They'd moved me to a gatehouse, a nothing post, parking it was called, where they put the ones they can't fire and can't trust. I think they meant it as a punishment, and I took it as a mercy, because I couldn't have stood near her after. I couldn't have looked at her every day knowing. But she sent for me. Once, unofficially, through a side channel, a note in the hand of a footman who didn't know what he was carrying. And I went to her, in a small sitting room in the part of the palace nobody used, and we were alone, no detail, no witnesses, which by then was easy for her because nobody wanted to be seen with her anyway. I'd built a whole speech. I was going to confess. I was going to tell her I'd pulled her off the girl, that I'd called her the threat in my head for that half-second, that I'd made the wound worse, that the medal they'd given me was a brand I wore on the inside and burned. I had it all ready. I'd been ready for months. I didn't get to say any of it. She looked at me and she knew. She knew everything I'd come to confess before I opened my mouth, because she'd been there too. She'd felt my hands pull her off. She understood exactly what had happened in that corridor better than anyone alive except me, and she put up her hand, the good one, to stop me. And the one thing she said, the only thing, the thing I've carried for 31 years, was this. She said the girl was safe. She said it like a fact and like a question and like an absolution all at once. The girl is safe. And I said yes. Yes, the princess was safe. She'd been kept safe. She'd never even fully understood what had happened above her in that gallery. They'd kept it from her too, she thought, like everyone, that her mother-in-law had had some kind of episode, and she was frightened of Sibba now and kept her distance. And that, I realized, watching the Queen's face, that was the cost Sibba had chosen to pay. The girl she'd saved would spend the rest of her life a little afraid of her, would believe the footage, would never know. And Sibba had decided that was acceptable, that it was worth it. Because the alternative, the truth, the investigation, pulling the thread, the alternative put the girl back in danger. As long as the world believed it had been a madwoman's outburst, nobody was looking for the man in the gallery. Nobody was looking at why he'd come. Nobody had any reason to try again. The lie was the only thing keeping Aduran safe. The lie about Sibba was Sibba's last act of protection, stretched out over the whole rest of her life. Every single day she let them call her a monster, being one more day the real monsters thought they'd won, and left the girl alone. She chose to be hated so the girl could be safe, and not even know she'd been in danger. I have never in my life been near anything that holy, and I was a man who guarded the holy for a living. I knelt in cathedrals for state funerals. I stood at coronations. I never saw anything in any of those gold rooms that came within 100 miles of an old woman, in an unused sitting room, deciding to let the world spit on her forever so a frightened girl could sleep. I didn't say any of that. I couldn't. I just stood there. And after a while she nodded the way you nod when a thing is finished, and I understood I was dismissed, and I went, and I never spoke to her again. She died 8 years later. The obituaries were cruel. One of them used the still, the mouth-open one, the Queen's face of hate 30 years on the day she died, because that was the only image of her the world had agreed to keep. So why now? Why, after all of it, am I writing this down? Aduran died last spring. The young princess, except she wasn't young anymore, she was nearly 60, she had grandchildren. She'd become over the long decades exactly the beloved figure the country had always wanted, the warm one, the steady one, the heart of the family. She had a good life, a long one. The one Sibba bought her in the West Corridor and then paid for in installments every day for the rest of her own. And she died never knowing. That's the thing I can't carry to the grave. Everyone else who was in that corridor or that room or that decision is dead now. The king's long dead. Corwin, who swapped his round, dead. The men who chose the lie, dead, all of them. I outlived the lot, which I think is its own kind of sentence. I'm the last one. I'm the only person left alive who knows what the footage didn't show, and when I go, the truth goes and the only version left will be the 40 seconds. The mouth open still, the face of hate. And I can't. I can't let that be the only thing. I can't let the last living memory of Queen Siba be a lie that she chose to wear to save a girl who never found out. Because a sacrifice that no one ever knows about is the loneliest thing in the universe, and she's been alone in it for 31 years and I won't leave her there. So here it is, for whoever reads it whenever, if ever. The footage is real and the footage is a lie, both, the way a single fact can be a lie if you cut away everything around it. There was a man in the gallery. There was a bolt. There were 2 hours in the dark of the music room. The queen didn't attack the princess. The queen threw her out of the path of a weapon and took the bolt herself, and then let the whole world believe the worst of her for the rest of her life, because the truth would have put the girl back in danger. And the guard in the gray coat, the hero, the man at the edge of the last frame with his back turned. He pulled the bravest woman he ever knew off the girl she just saved, and made her wound worse, and got a medal for it, and spent 31 years too much of a coward to say so until everyone who could have been hurt by the saying of it was safely dead. That's me, that's the truth of me. I wasn't the shield, she was the shield. I was just the man the camera happened to be able to see. I still watch the empty corridor sometimes, the first 9 seconds, before she comes in. I sit in the dark with the sound off, there was never any sound, and I watch the lamps and the worn red carpet and the black window with the ghost hallway floating in it. And I wait, and for 9 seconds she's still alive and still ordinary and still mine to warn. And every time, every single time, some stupid part of me thinks this time I'll be faster. This time I'll look up. This time I'll see the gallery first and it'll be me and not her. And then she comes in running, and I'm too slow, I'm always too slow. 40 seconds. That's all it ever was. 40 seconds in the West Corridor and a whole life built on the wrong half of them. They think they know what the footage showed. They don't. They never did. Now somebody does.